All right, let's go ahead and continue. We are now going to move on to the Zone 4 debate. This one's going to look a little bit different. When I reached out and invited the candidates to participate, Clarissa Smith, who is also running for Zone 4 School Board, had a prior commitment, so she is unable to be with us here tonight. Katie is here with us, Katie Darby. So the format is going to go the same, timing is going to go the same. We'll go the same. It just won't be the alternating back and forth of questions. All the questions will be directed directly to Katie Darby. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for attending, Katie Darby. And as I had mentioned to our Zone 1 candidates, the topics of the questions tonight are going to be revolving around trust, process, legitimacy, accountability, ideology, priorities, communication, growth and funding, charter schools and school choice, and Rutherford County Republican principles. We'll start with your opening statement. You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Katie Darby, and I am running for re-election on the Rutherford County School Board for Zone 4. My journey to the school board started almost 10 years ago, and it started with an incident involving my son in elementary school where a safety issue was brought up. I met with the principal of that school and expressed my concerns about the lack of supervision and was pretty much dismissed. So I went to the current director of schools at that time and felt like I was again dismissed. So it kind of lit a fire to get more involved, feeling like if I couldn't get answers when it came to student safety or a response, why not try to get involved and learn more about the process and see if I couldn't affect that change from the inside. So I really felt like we needed to make sure that parents' voices were being heard and that concerns were being met. And so that was my reason for running at the time. It's still a huge passion of mine. I'm a very big advocate for students and parents as well as our teachers and staff. And so that's why I'm here.
All right, very good. The first question that we have tonight is about Republican principles. How do you define the core Republican principles in Rutherford County, and can you give specific examples of how you would apply those principles when making school board decisions?
Oh, goodness. I would say Republican principles would be limited government, fiscal conservatism. I define myself as being extremely conservatism, which happens to align with the Republican Party. And a lot of my decisions are based off of those conservative values and principles. I voted against having explicit material in our schools because I have those morals and values, and I believe that it's extremely important to maintain the innocence of our children, and that certain topics and subjects should definitely be under parental control. When and how those things are introduced to their children is a responsibility of the parent. I also exposed some issues that we had at Laverne High School where some inappropriate YouTube videos were being shown to some students. And I made sure to push our central office and make sure those parents were notified about that situation. So.
All right. Second question is about trust and transparency. Many community members feel there's a lack of transparency in how decisions are made. What specific steps would you take to make the board's decision-making process more open and understandable before votes occur?
I think that our work sessions are an important piece of that. I know there has been some discussion about people wanting to eliminate those work sessions. I think it's important to have those work sessions. A lot of times things can be brought to light at those work sessions. If we're discussing information, I go in and research and deep dive a lot of the stuff that we go through. I did a deep dive on our salary study when we did it. I tried to separate our vote for teacher raises from our central office staff only because we were giving our teachers a 5% raise while central office had an average of 14% at the time. So I wanted to pass our teacher raises and just take a little bit longer to look at those salaries because there were salaries that were adequate and didn't need to be given a raise, and they wanted us to just give a raise across the board. So those discussions that happen at work sessions can be really important. And I think it's when school board members have an opportunity to maybe give some insight on some research or some information that they've come across that maybe another school board member didn't have the opportunity to get to. And when you have those discussions, if you go into the meeting open-minded, you might be given information or data that may change your mind. It may bring something to light you didn't think about or were unaware of.
Okay. The next question is about public input. Residents consistently express that public comments are heard but don't influence outcomes. What concrete system would you implement to ensure community input clearly affects board decisions?
I think this is an interesting topic, as we did have on our previous board, not the current board, had a vote that came up and was discussed regarding limiting public comment to things that were just germane to the agenda. I think that's a huge mistake. I know there are parents that have issues that come up all the time that are not going to be something on our agenda. It is our job as a school board to be there, to listen to our constituents, to hear from our parents, to hear even from our teachers. I have heard from some teachers before, there's something happening and they are afraid to come forward because they don't want to lose their job or they don't want it to affect their child. I know myself, I've had some concerns that sometimes I've had to go and I get a little nervous about bringing them up because I don't want things to be retaliatory against my kids. And so I think we need to work on instituting that trust so we can open those conversations and make sure that people have a nice back and forth, that they feel like they're getting a result. Sometimes people just need to vent and be heard and know that someone has heard what their issue is. Sometimes that issue requires some sort of a response. I think one of our biggest issues in our community is that people don't necessarily know the process. They don't necessarily know. I see stuff on Facebook all the time that they're not coming to the school board members. And so there's a lot of things that we aren't even aware of.
And along the same lines, this one is about predetermined decisions, or what's known as rubber stamping. There is a growing perception that major decisions are effectively made before meetings and simply approved publicly. How would you ensure board deliberations are genuine and not perceived as something that's predetermined?
Well, I think there's a law in place called Sunshine Law. 2 or more board members are not allowed to get together and come to a conclusion, have an outcome, try to influence each other's decisions or votes. I think that's an extremely important law. I think part of the problem is there's not a huge consequence to that law if it's proven to be broken. But I don't think that board members should be discussing things and coming to conclusions outside of the public light. Again, that whole work session, that working that out is the opportunity to be able to find more information so that we can then go back. Sometimes I've asked for extra time, like, hey, I would like some more time to really dig into this a little further. Unfortunately, you do have to have a majority vote to be able to get that extra time, which doesn't always happen. I also think sometimes things can look a certain way. If you have a like-minded board in which, honestly, after the last, prior to just a couple months ago, we had done a little bit of some research. 90% of the time, our board voted unanimously. So we are a lot of the time like-minded. That did not include book votes and it didn't include special meetings. But for our regular meetings, 90% of the time we're voting together. So when you are like-minded, I think sometimes it can appear that way. That's not necessarily the case. But if you have board members who are very like-minded, I think it can appear that way, even though that may not necessarily be what's happening.
Okay. Next question is about accountability of individual board members. Voters are increasingly holding individual board members accountable for outcomes, not just the board as a whole. How do you personally take responsibility for your votes, and how should voters evaluate your performance?
I think that if you go back and watch meetings where we have taken some significant votes, you will see the full context of my votes. I don't always talk a lot at our meetings, but when I do talk, it's usually because I have a lot to say about some research or some data or some information that I have received and gotten. Those explanations back up the way I vote. I have a very conservative voting record. I do a lot of things based off of information and data that I've been given. A great example would be we recently voted to purchase 4 properties at the McFadden School. We want to rebuild that school. The parents in that community wanted to make it larger. Totally on board with all of those things. The appraisals on those properties came back. They came back over $500,000 less than what our contracts went in at. So I asked our attorney if we had negotiated those, and it was kind of, he hadn't talked to everybody, and it was kind of a, I don't know, it wasn't a clear, concrete answer. I wanted the board to go back to those homeowners and say, hey, here's where those appraisals came in. The board would like to offer you the appraised value, and then let those sellers come back to us. Because at the end of the day, if they had come back and said, we're not moving, I can at least say to my constituents, we tried. We went back and we said, here's where the appraisals are. Here's where we are. And if they won't sell for that, then they won't. But I think it deserves the effort to go back to negotiate.
This is one of the most emotionally charged and ideologically defining issues facing the school board: parental rights versus school authority. When there is a conflict between parental preferences and school policies, especially regarding curriculum, obscene or inappropriate materials, or student-related issues, who should have the final say and why?
Parents should have the final say. It's their children. It's pretty simple. I already spoke to the books, and I illuminated a Laverne High School issue that I brought light to. At the end of the day, I have always, with my own children, operated on, we watch, if the kids are going to watch TV, we're going to watch what's appropriate for the youngest person in the room. So I think as schools, we need to operate in that fashion. If there's a question about whether something is explicit or appropriate, then it doesn't belong there. But ultimately, for me, that decision rests with the parents. It's their children, so it should be their choice.
This next question revolves around budget priorities and trade-offs. With limited resources, what would be your top 2 funding priorities? And what would you be willing to reduce or eliminate to support them?
Ooh, some hot button items here. Our growth is obviously an issue. It has been an issue, and I think our current board has done a really good job of trying to address that with the building of 2 new schools, with purchasing some land. We're doing catch up from a pretty much 4 to 5 year hiatus from building any schools, all the while our county was growing. So unfortunately, I don't think that need is going away anytime soon. So I think that has to be one of our top priorities. I also think that our staff is important. If we don't have good people in those buildings teaching our children, then it's all for naught. So we need to make sure we're rewarding those people. I would love to see us focus on, it's something I'm actually currently working on, is a merit-based pay or bonus program for our teachers. For those teachers that are excelling, I would love to see them get something for that, because we have some amazing teachers, and sometimes those teachers are standing next door to a teacher who is maybe just, not sure what they want to do. So they're just kind of, it's their job, but they're not excelling like the teacher next door, but they might be making the same pay. So I would love to see our amazing teachers rewarded. I think it's hard. It's very difficult when you talk about having to cut programs or cut finances, but there are things that Rutherford County is doing that are great programs, but we're not required to do them. So sometimes it looks like having to cut something like that temporarily until you get caught up somewhere else and then bring that program back.
Okay, this next question revolves around communication and leadership style. There appears to be a growing gap between how the board communicates and how the public perceives those responses. How would you change the board's communication approach to rebuild trust while maintaining professionalism?
I think you need leaders, and I think you need people who are going to hold the line, people who want to be there and be professional. I think it's absolutely unprofessional to criticize or call names or make fun of our constituents. Getting up and speaking in any public forum is not an easy thing to do. So when our community comes to speak to us, I love that. I appreciate that. And listen, half the time it's people that are angry at something we've done. So it's not always a fun place to be on the receiving end. But we need to respect them. They have taken their time to drive to our meeting straight after work to get there by 5:30 to speak to us, we should be respectful of that. We should be respectful of one another. And when our chair gavels us to be quiet or to move on, we should respect the chair in that position. I think when things get out of order and it gets chaotic and the chair is having to gavel multiple times and it's still occurring, it's not a good look. It doesn't look professional. So I think I'm not sure what you do with that other than instituting probably some pretty significant, if I gavel one time and you don't cease, I'm going to have you escorted from the meeting, because I don't know what else you would do at that point.
Okay. This next question revolves around strategic planning versus reactive spending. School overcrowding is already an issue, but some leaders have warned about the risk of building schools in the wrong locations as growth shifts across the county. How would you ensure long-term planning aligns with future growth, not just current demand? And how would you prioritize where new schools are built?
I think this current board has done a good job of that with hiring RSP. We did have that study done, and they continue to reevaluate and come back to us, making sure that our numbers are correct. And unfortunately, in my area, they did miss the mark a little bit in the Stewart's Creek area. I think things got built much faster than they were expecting. I am a fan myself of slightly smaller school models. I think that while in a fiscal way, it's a difficult thing to figure out. The bigger schools obviously hold more children, more students. So I know a lot of times our county commissioners want to build them bigger because we're building it all at one time and it's less expensive that way. I think it's going to be difficult to balance that. I'm hearing from a lot of our community members that they want smaller schools. They want community schools. They want to be able to not have to drive 30 to 40 minutes to get their kid to school. So I think it's important to not only look at where we're growing, but how do we want to grow as a community? I also think that, that presents interesting opportunities to not have to buy such larger parcels of land, which might open up opportunities for places we haven't yet looked at.
All right, and our final question revolves around funding and cost discipline. Rutherford County is growing rapidly. New schools are clearly needed, but the school board does not control taxation and must rely on the county commission for funding. How would you advocate for and prioritize new school funding while also ensuring projects are built as efficiently and cost effectively as possible?
Again, kind of ties in a little bit to our previous thing. I know that we have continued to use the same design plans that we've had made so that we're not having to pay for fresh designs all over again. But I also think there's some interesting things that we've seen as school board members when we've gone out and looked, like Jack and Jill schools, where like a middle and elementary school may use the same cafeteria. And so you're using up the same amount of land, but you're almost kind of doubling those common area spaces. So I think there's opportunities for some unique choices to be looked into. I do think charter schools have helped some with that because we do not have to fund to build those schools. Those charter schools are coming in and they're paying for that themselves. And I think it provides a unique opportunity for the students that our larger schools may not fit. I've talked to a few parents whose students just don't do well in that large environment. And these charter schools provide something different. And so I think having those choices and those different opportunities creates things, not just for our students and parents, different opportunities, but also planning wise and fiscally wise, it prevents some unique opportunities to look at some different things.
Okay, thank you. And that is it on our question segment. We're now going to allot 2 minutes of time for you to make your closing statement and why you're the best choice in Zone 4.
Thank you. Thank you again to the Rutherford County Young Republicans and the GOP for allowing me to participate this evening. And I want to thank all of the constituents for being here. You are the reason I have been on the board the last 4 years, and you will be the reason if I stay on the board for the next 4. If you're looking for a candidate who is objective, guided by logic, a true conservative, that is who I am. I am just a mom. I'm a mom that got super passionate about an issue that she had with her child. And when I felt like my voice wasn't being heard, I decided to get involved. I'm not a politician. I have zero desire to run for any higher office. So I humbly ask for your vote. And I'm not approaching this role with assumptions or agendas. I show up, I do my research, I ask questions, I make decisions based on facts. I don't make them based off of pressure or popularity or politics or convenience. I'm fiscally conservative, and I believe every dollar matters and should be spent wisely. I believe parents' voices should be heard and they should be involved in their child's education. I'm not a rubber stamper. I have voted on my own more than once on the school board. My responsibility is to think independently and to evaluate every decision on its merits and to do what's right, even when it's not the easiest path. But more important than anything I've said, I would like to encourage you to do your homework. Go online, watch the meetings, watch the full context, not just on me, but on every candidate. Look at how the decisions are made, pay attention to who asks questions, pay attention to the context, who challenges assumptions, and who's willing to stand on principle. Because this role on the school board is not about the title, it's about the trust. And the trust should be earned through our actions, not through our words. Thank you so much, and I would be honored to have your vote.
All right, we're going to take another 5-minute intermission.